There's a lot of news going on all across Washington state and, of course, around the world. October 7th, one-year anniversary of the Hamas terrorist attacks against innocent Jews. We have ongoing concerns around the FEMA response to not just the past Hurricane Helene, but the upcoming Hurricane Milton, and so much more. Joining me in studio, very rare to get him over to the west side of the state, is our friend Congressman Dan Newhouse from the east side. Thank you so much for coming down.
Jason, it's a pleasure to be here, to see you in action in your own studio.
I know this is the first time you've actually been down here. We've talked many, many times. Let's just jump right into October 7th. It's the one-year anniversary. Today, there have been even counter-protests against folks who are just getting together to support Israel, to remember those who were lost, but also remember everyone who's still in captivity in Israel, or in Gaza from Israel. Do you get the sense that we are now living in a time in which anti-Semitism is openly espoused?
Well, first of all, Jason, thank you for having me in studio. This is a rare privilege for me to be here with you. We usually talk on the telephone, and this makes it a little easier to have a conversation, so thanks for that. And it's a beautiful day here in Seattle. I came from the east side of the state just this morning, and glad to be able to enjoy some of the weather you have here with you. Yes, this is a very concerning topic that we're seeing more, I guess you could say, anti-Semitism in our country. That to me is very troubling.
It's not even subtle.
No, not at all. Not at all. And we're actually seeing it in the halls of Congress as well. We reflect the American population, the people that are elected by the people, and we're seeing some of that play out there. So,
what are some specific avenues that you've seen coming from Democrat colleagues or Republican colleagues, I suppose?
Well, I think it's mostly on the Democratic side.
I haven't seen any on the right.
So I don't want to say for sure because I haven't seen what everybody says, but it's mostly coming from the Democrats. I see it in comments that are made. I see it in speeches that are given. I see it in legislation on how people vote. Reluctance to support Israel and continue to aid our biggest ally in the Middle East. So that's very, very troubling.
I want to be specific about, in this case, because she's part of the Washington Democrat Congressional Caucus. I mean, Pramila Jayapal. She's the congresswoman from here in Seattle. Unfortunately, she's my congresswoman. She's been very critical, almost, I think, exclusively critical of Israel, very reluctant to ever call out Hamas, refer to them as terrorists. She's a big part of the problem.
Well, just look at what today is, October 7th, the one-year anniversary of really the massacre, the largest murdering of Jews that has taken place since World War II.
Yeah.
1,200 lives were taken that day, and who knows since then how many more. There were 250 hostages taken that day. I think almost 100 are still unaccounted for. Some of those are Americans.
Yep.
And so to, in any way, justify Hamas's actions is, to me, that's unforgivable.
Do you fear the relationship between the United States and Israel if Kamala Harris is the next president? I mean, do you feel that there might be a larger bit of power for the progressive movement?
Well, that's a really good question. I hope not. That's my, some of the things that have been said are concerning. That there's more. I'm a very a caring individual. Absolutely, I don't want to see anybody get hurt, but to place anybody above the responsibility that we have to Israel and to help her defend herself in the Middle East is very concerning. So I would think as anybody who's commander-in-chief would take that same position to preserve and defend Israel. But I think there is some of the things that you can't have it both ways, right? Mm-hmm. People are trying to keep people on both sides of this happy. I think we have to start out from a position of strength, be clear in our support of Israel. That has to be our number one position.
And there really isn't two sides of this, right? I mean, I get your point, which is certainly it seems like Democrats are trying to have it both ways. They're talking out of both sides of their mouths. But at the end of the day, it's about Israel, a democracy, right, and it's about Hamas, a terrorist organization that, despite the Queers for Palestine movement, would have those people killed the second they were stepping foot into Gaza.
So it's an easy decision to make, I would think, for all Americans, that we would stand up for those people that are trying to preserve their democracy, trying to preserve the freedom for their country and their citizens, protect them from these terrorist groups. It's Hamas, it's Hezbollah, it's the Houthis. There's a tremendous amount of pressure right now in the Middle East. And what I'd like to remind people is certainly it's in Israel's best interest that we do that, but it's also in the United States' best interest that Israel is successful in defending herself.
Do you see any parallels between, on the right, the response in support of Israel versus the response to Russia versus Ukraine? In that I think there's certainly been, more suspicion, at least in the way money is being spent and what it is we're actually doing with our support of Ukraine. I think generally Republicans support Ukraine just as much as any other country, but it seems like there is more suspicion in mismanagement of funds coming from the Biden administration.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think most Republicans, most Americans support Ukraine in their efforts to defend themselves against Russia, but there has been a bit more of a history there of things that we need to be very careful of when we give money to Ukraine. But from what I've seen, Jason, I've been on many of these meetings that we are given information that we can't share publicly. But from what I've seen is that there's a tremendous amount of accountability and transparency on the part of the Ukrainians to the United States and the things that we give them. So I'm confident that can more be done? Probably, but I'm confident that the resources that we're allocating to Ukraine are being put to the use that we want them to be.
What then are the parallels between Democrats who are all in support of Ukraine, give them as much money as humanly possible, and then Israel, whoa, slow your roll. We can't even give them any weapons because they might be used against Hamas terrorists. That's
just a total misunderstanding of the dynamic in the Middle East, I think. It truly is. We have a role to play there. And like I said, this is in our best interest to help Israel defend themselves. And in both instances, there's American soldiers are not engaged in this. And I think most Americans would like to keep it that way.
Well, they're engaged in the sense that they will help in defense.
That's true, yes.
So in that way they are, and I'm assuming there's no issues with that.
That's, I think, a very supported position that we help aid Israel in their trying to fend off all of these barrages of attacks. One thing that I see, Jason, happening in this country is kind of going back to an isolationist kind of mentality that we saw prior to World War II. I think that's a very dangerous position for us to take. We are a large enough country that we have the ability to do both things: take care of what's happening in our country and also keep our eyes open for the threats that are posed around the world.
How would you? And we're talking with Congressman Dan Newhouse, a Republican from the 4th Congressional District, running for re-election. He's facing a challenger on the right, in this case, Jared Sessler, for re-election. How would you characterize the Donald Trump doctrine as it relates to interfering or getting engaged in foreign conflict? It seems like, I know some folks have labeled it as isolationist, which I don't think is an accurate description necessarily. It seems like he's saying we're going to engage so that it doesn't get to the point of having to be involved, but also not being actively involved in every single conflict that comes up.
I think that's fair. I think the former president takes a position that similar to Ronald Reagan in some ways, in projecting strength, which I think is important, that the motto of peace through strength, I totally take, I understand, and I think that that's a true statement. And I think the former president takes that as well. We have to project strength. Otherwise, other countries are always looking for opportunities to take advantage of a weak America or a weak Western world. And so that inability to make decisions or to hold one of Israel's arms behind their back so they are unable to fully defend themselves just tells our adversaries that maybe America is not as committed as they need to be, and they're always looking for opportunities to take advantage of that.
Are we telling them that exact same thing right now, whether we're talking to Iran or to Russia or to China? Is this administration under Biden-Harris telegraphing to them that we're kind of weak?
I think there is a very large concern that this administration is telling our adversaries that we are not totally decisive in what our actions should be, that we're holding back, and that there are some reasons why I can grant it, but I think the message that our adversaries are getting, that America is weak on this issue.
To the extent that this is an issue, generally speaking, that plays a role in whom someone's going to vote for in the 4th Congressional District, how are you the better choice than Jared Sessler?
I am fully behind our ally in Israel. There's no qualifications. I am not equivocating whatsoever. Like I said, Israel's strength, Israel's ability to defend herself is in their interest, but it's totally in our interest too. Peace in that part of the world is a huge matter of national security for the United States of America. I understand that. I get that. And I also understand the danger of allowing Russia to just do whatever it wants to in Eastern Europe. So there are so many things at risk. One of the things that I have the privilege of sitting on is the Select Committee on China, which was put together to understand the threats that the Communist Chinese Party poses to the United States. And let me tell you, the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, the North Koreans are all paying very close attention to what we as a country do, how we respond, the actions that we take, the things that we telegraph. They are paying so close attention to, so that they can take advantage of any sign of weakness.
Is China the biggest geopolitical threat?
I think you can make that argument, absolutely.
Would you make that argument?
I would. They're economically, militarily, in so many ways, they have a stated goal of world domination. And they have a long-term plan in place to achieve that goal. They are in everything, in every part of the economy you can think of. They already have a toehold in other countries around the world.
Well, just here, I mean, the amount of land that they own, particularly farmland, as well as housing units, it's pretty significant. And I know that you've been working to try to at least stymie some of their progress.
This has been an issue I've been working on for almost 4 years now. I was the very first one to bring this issue up, and thankfully, a lot of people are now on board proposing different ideas that we should do as a country to prevent China from getting an upper hand in our food supply chain, preventing the CCP from buying agricultural assets in the United States. This is my legislation that's moving through Congress right now. One of the things that I get criticized for is that, this isn't such a big deal. They don't own that much. A small percentage of our American farmland the Chinese own. So yeah, that may be true, but the amount of farmland that they're gaining control of has grown by a factor of 10 in the last decade.
It's not that small, the amount that they own, correct?
And it's growing.
Yeah.
And not only that, they're also trying to secure land near points of national security, whether it's military bases or important infrastructure in the country. That we've got to be very careful that we don't allow this to happen. And I think the best time to take action is before it becomes a huge problem, to be proactive, to be stop it before it becomes something that we can't change, that we can't turn around. And so I think this is absolutely the right time to be taking action.
Congressman Dan Newhouse joining us in studio. When we come back, we're going to dive into the issue that impacts absolutely everyone, energy independence. Plus, we'll talk about the FEMA response thus far. You're listening to The Jason Rantz Show. Back with more after this. Welcome back to The Jason Rantz Show. Continuing our conversation in studio, Congressman Dan Newhouse. He's running for re-election in the 4th Congressional District on the east side of the state. Heading into the break, we mentioned energy independence. Obviously, that has become a very significant issue for us, slightly different than everywhere else, in that we also pay a large attention to our dams and hydroelectric. Generally speaking, it seems like the polls indicate Republicans, or at least Donald Trump, trusted more than Kamala Harris and Democrats on this issue.
Rightfully so.
Rightfully so. What are some of the things that you see coming down that could impact us even more, that folks maybe aren't even talking about yet?
Well, one thing, and you brought this up, the hydroelectric system that we have in the Pacific Northwest, which has allowed us to prosper and grow economically, culturally, has brought to the Columbia Basin, for instance, has become one of the most productive agricultural areas, not just in the United States, but in the world. the low-cost, affordable energy that's produced by the hydroelectric systems, the dams on the Columbia and the Snake River, have brought so much industry and commerce to the Pacific Northwest. And what's concerning about that whole issue, that this administration, and I think would continue under a Harris administration, would be the strong efforts moving toward breaching dams on the Snake River.
Well, I think they've said that pretty openly, right? I mean,
absolutely.
At this point, we should assume that they're going to breach the dams.
Absolutely. Although they keep walking that back, saying, "Oh, that's not our ultimate goal. We're just looking for how would we replace the power that's generated by these dams? What could we be doing to maybe continue with the benefits that we're getting, but in different ways?"
Yeah, well, that means breaching the dam, right?
Yeah, right. And so I think that's a continued risk that we would see. And there's just, I could talk for an hour about this particular issue, but I think that is so backwards thinking. The state of Washington, you know this, Jason. By 2030, we're supposed to grow by another 1 million people. By 2040, another 1 million on top of that. We need every source of power we can get. We're already so incredibly close to being short on power on those hot summer days or those cold winter nights that we're close to brownouts already. We can't afford to be taking away major sources of power generation. The 4 Lower Snakes dams in question produce enough energy to power the entire city of Seattle. And, you'd have to build thousands and thousands of acres of solar farms in order to replace that.
And solar farms in this part of the country, not the best investment.
Yeah, people tell you not even to put in a swimming pool because you don't even have time to use it. But on top of that, with the growth in AI, and if everybody's going to be plugging in an EV like the governor wants us to, all of these demands for increased power, I don't know how we're supposed to meet that if we pull back on those things that we know work.
Well, there's technology that works in nuclear, right?
Absolutely.
And we're not supposed to talk about that apparently because it's got a bad brand, I guess. Amongst, I think, even Republicans. I don't
think so.
I don't think as much, certainly.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you say we're going to build a nuclear plant, no one wants to live next to it, right? And there's just inherent safety concerns from folks. I wouldn't want to live next door to one either, but that has nothing to do with the safety concerns, right? I mean, how do we get nuclear energy to become a larger discussion in this country? And then more than just a discussion, but actually an action plan.
So let me just push back a little bit on that. You're absolutely right that the not in my backyard kind of mentality on nuclear plants, or not build them at all, was the more prevalent kind of thinking in this country, in this state, probably 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Today, we have the technology has moved so far on these things that the 3 Mile Island thing or the Chernobyl thing, with the new kinds of reactors that we're talking about today, that's virtually impossible to happen.
Yeah, but people don't know that. The average person, if I were to ask about this, probably still would bring up both of those events,
probably,
right? And
probably.
I don't think we're certainly not having this as a bigger conversation for energy independence. We're talking about natural gas, which is important, obviously. We're obviously talking about what Democrats want to take away. But this seems like something that would be an easy win as far as generating the energy that we need in a safe and clean way.
Nuclear. And I think having this conversation on your show here today is going to be part of moving people's opinions towards, we can have a safe nuclear industry. And, the people on my side of the mountains generally are very open to this.
Good.
So it's a good thing. In fact,
it would likely be on your side of the state.
Oh, probably so. But as a matter of fact, the Tri-Cities will be the center of these small modular reactors. The manufacturing of them, the components that are used to them, for them, could be built in the Tri-Cities and then shipped all over the country or all over the world.
Dan Newhouse, Congressman from the 4th Congressional District, joining me in studio. Let's wrap things up talking about the FEMA response.
Sure.
We're getting completely conflicting statements from this administration. On the one hand, they actively told us that they were using FEMA funds for illegal immigrants. And now they're claiming that that's not the case. They're playing a little bit of a semantics game and talking about the current fund that we're currently using to help folks for Hurricane Helene have nothing to do with the dollars that people are claiming going to immigration. Clearly, they spent money on illegal immigrants. That is a fact. They said that.
Oh, absolutely. It's something called the Shelter and Services Program, the SSP, that is part of the administration. They put this thing together, and they give upwards of $9,000 to immigrants when they come to this country, supposedly to help those communities that are feeling the rush of all these numbers of people coming in. So my question, we've got a lot of questions, and when we get back in November to Washington, D.C., this is going to be one of the top things that we're going to be looking at is what in the heck is going on here? If these communities, these cities that are getting all these people coming in need help, why isn't that money going to them?
Yeah, precisely. I mean, we know generally where they're going.
Yeah, but these are two different funds. The disaster relief fund.
But it's under FEMA, right? I mean, they're playing the semantics game.
Right. But they're not using the one to pay for the other.
Correct. I'm just simply saying that, and for the most part, what we've heard is that folks on the right have used generalized terms, and that FEMA dollars are going towards illegal immigrants, and you're telling me now you don't have any money for hurricane season.
Well, I think that second statement is absolutely false.
It is false, but that's what Mayorkas is saying.
Yeah, and when
he's not telling the truth. I know that is a fact. Fox News today had a story about this. Basically, they have a slush fund that's available to them that they can spend however it is they want, but because of some of the bureaucratic rules, you can't just simply move it to another part of the budget.
Yeah, but before we left town 2 weeks ago on the continuing resolution, we made sure that FEMA had enough money. And they will continue to have enough money to get through Helene, and it looks like Milton is bearing down on the Florida coast. Who knows what that's going to bring?
Yeah.
But all of these things, people are getting relief. FEMA has enough money to respond. Will they need more at some point in time? Yes, but the way the system works, it won't be until after the evaluations are made to see what the needs are, and then Congress will be back in just a month anyway, and we'll be able to make sure that those funds are available.
Is FEMA doing a good enough job? We continue to hear from folks who still say they haven't even had contact with FEMA.
Well, it's 2 weeks and counting. A lot of people are stranded. It's a huge event. I can only imagine that our services are being overwhelmed. It's too early for me to say from way out here in the state of Washington whether they're doing everything that they're supposed to be doing. But I hear those reports too, that people are feeling stranded, forgotten, that they haven't seen any support yet. So if that's the case, we need to make sure that gets corrected. But like I said, it's there's a lot of things happening. And just look at I was able to see a map at night taken of the southern United States from space, and you could just tell the blacked out area that didn't have power. It's huge. Yeah. It's huge. And so I keep that in mind. But on the other hand, I also know there are a lot of people suffering, and we should be doing everything we can to be getting them relief.
We have a minute left. I will leave you with the pitch to voters. Obviously, there is overlap between what you believe and what your opponent, Jared Sessler, believed. That's what generally happens when you have two Republicans going up against one another. So why should voters give you another term?
So I tell people, and people understand this, I'm born and raised in the Yakima Valley. That's my home. My business is there. My family's there. I understand the issues that are most important to people in Central Washington. Why? Because they're my issues too. I live them every single day. So I'm best equipped to respond to those things that would bring answers, relief, the solutions that we need to the challenges that we face, versus somebody that, and no offense to your listeners here, that just moved over from the west side a very short time ago. He doesn't understand. He doesn't understand us on the east side of the state. And there are differences.
I feel like that's a general theme of both sides of the states generally not truly understanding one another.
Yeah. And so, I think I'm best suited. I've got experience in Congress. I'm in a position, I've been there long enough that I truly know what to do. I know the people that are there. I can get things done. I've got a track record of proven results, and I've got the fire in my belly to continue working very hard on behalf of my constituents. So I think the choice is clear.
There you go. Congressman Dan Newhouse, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
You're listening to The Jason Rantz Show. Back with more after this.